How do? Welcome to southern Alberta. It's grand here, isn't it? Look at this. This is the Old Man River, and I've come out here because I'm going to do a video for us, and this is an answer to a question that I sort of got about a week ago really on Facebook, and I thought it might be a good idea if I didn't sort of answer it really, because I bet it's right up on the list of things that people want to ask. But anyway, I've come out here because this, which hopefully you'll be able to see if I've figured out how to make my gimbal pan around, this is the second half of the Old Man Bridge. Well, the high level bridge at any rate that goes over Old Man River. Now comes in two halves. This is the second half of it. It's a small half, but the other half I've done a bit of a video on before, and you saw that when I was with my Velar, or when I had Velar any road as a courtesy vehicle. Now from this angle here you can just see a bit more of the bridge casting its shadow on the far banks of the coulee there, but this is a beautiful example of how high this is. It's 300 feet in the bottom, this bridge. Here it's not very high at all, but down in the bottom there's 300 feet further down, and it stands majestically. If you go down into the bottom it almost seems like the what's that big thing in Paris called, the Eiffel Tower. He said, that's my Eiffel Tower impression. But this is the second half of it, and you can see it's a grand old affair, isn't it? It's another big tall thing. It's not anywhere near as high or as tall as the high level bridge in Lethbridge, but it's actually technically the same bridge. It was built in order to manipulate the new direction, I suppose, of the way that this bridge of the railroad, the way it came in, and they shifted it over at river and they brought it this way. Before that it went round bottom of Lethbridge and down into Coolies and then up other side and then round bottom at Old Man River. But this is called the Monarch bit. It's, well, I don't know about it's called the Monarch bit, but it is the Monarch bit. It's the bit that sort of comes out of Monarch, which is a little town. Actually, I don't know whether you can just see this, but right behind here there's a little grain elevator and a bunch of things. Anyway, I've come out here and I'll tell you what question is that I was asked. I was on Facebook, and I was making a post actually about new tyres that I fitted, and the question I was asked was, do I miss the Defender? Do I miss Finn? And the tagline that came behind it was, go on, be honest. And so I'm going to be. So I'm just going to sit down here because I've got Range Rover sat in this place so you can see me and bridge, and with any luck you'll be able to hear me. Now I do have a dog somewhere, but I don't know where he's gone. Jip! Any road. So the question, do I miss, come on dog, do I miss the Defender? And the answer to that question is no, not really, and I'll explain why. The Defender was a very, very good tool. I liked it a lot, and really because of the things that I do, the kinds of, I suppose you call them overlanding, don't you really, but the kind of overlanding things that I do, and because of the kind of work that I do, the Defender was actually the perfect tool, and I suppose that's kind of where it fits in that niche, you know, that kind of in the range, in the mark, where the Defender fits is sort of I mean, it's a perfect vehicle really, you know, the kind of thing that you throw kayaks on, and the kind of thing that you go camping in and with, and then the kind of thing that you throw a couple of sheep in the back, and the kind of thing that you throw some wood on the roof or some tent or something like that, and the kinds of things you go off-roading in, and overlanding and trail driving, all that kind of stuff. I mean, in terms of where it fits in that mark, it's absolutely, in the Land Rover range, it's absolutely like they nailed it for me, which is, I suppose, one of the reasons that I was so keen to get into it. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that it's an excellent tool. I mean, I enjoyed it as well, and I dare say that if you don't have the kinds of difficulties I had with it, it'd probably be a grand tool as well. I mean, there are some vestigial issues, aren't there, because the Defender's using that 2 litre diesel that keeps blowing up. Well, I know at least 13 of them now. My mate Tim, his blew up in England just recently. Actually, he was on his way back from the Ukraine, as it happens. So it couldn't have happened at a worse time, really. But anyway, it blew up for him, and I know 2 people in New Zealand and 2 people in Australia with the 2 litres pot. But anyway, that's another story. But that aside, let me explain why I don't miss it. And I should really caveat that, because there are some things that I do miss. I think it's one of the best looking vehicles Land Rover's produced in, really, since probably the Discovery 3. I think the LR3, if you want to talk in terms of that. I mean, the LR3 was light years ahead of its style in terms of styling for anything else that was on the road, and it still looks fresh. So that aside, and the fact, like, my very favourite thing about it was the roof rack and the ladder and the pannier, and I can't tell you how much I used either of those 2 things. The ladder, the roof, well, the 3 things, the ladder, the roof rack and the pannier, really made it, for me, the perfect vehicle, because it allowed me to use the roof rack in a daily way that didn't require a bunch of gymnastics to get up there or wherever. It made loading the kayak like a dream. You just walked up the ladder with it. It was a remarkable experience in terms of that. So the ladder and the looks of the vehicle and the pannier, which I did find very useful. All the stuff in here is stored under this floor here, but as you can see, I've got stuff on the floor, so lifting it up requires me to move these little net things that I've got going on, and so on and so forth. So it's just more awkward to have things stored in it. It's not that you can't store them in it, it's just a little bit more awkward. But I'll explain why I don't miss it in terms of anything other than the looks and the practicality of the roof rack. Well, there were a lot of technological leaps forwards. This vehicle doesn't have the adaptive cruise control. Danny, the Discovery, had, and I really liked that. I thought the adaptive cruise was very, very helpful. The shift from the 6-speed transmission to the 8-speed transmission, I'm not actually that convinced by the betterness of the 8-speed. Because Land Rover haven't got those lower first, second, third shift protocol sorted, because they haven't sorted it out, and because the car wants to drop a couple of gears every time you come, or 1 gear, every time you get somewhere near a corner or a curve, and it seems to want to drop down into first gear before it needs it, really, and then you end up with what one of the lads on, Adam Worleyton, he was saying when he noticed the effect, that it's like having a learner driver trying to figure out how to get clutch control. You end up with this really surge forwards as it drops the gear for no apparent reason whatsoever when you're not expecting it, and that's a continual complaint. I mean, the Discovery 5 groupies complained about it when that came out, because it's the same, I suppose it's the same issue for them. I know a number of people complained about it on the Defender. A lady in America sold hers because of it. Adam Worlington traded his Adam traded his for a Discovery for that reason. Noting that the Discovery does really suffer from it just the same as the Defender, but he seems like it doesn't affect him so much in the Disco. Maybe his doesn't do it to some, but anyway, so that 8-speed, 6-speed thing, it's not really something that I'm quite impressed by. To be honest, I find the 6-speed better. I like the it changes when I want it to, or sort of changes when I seem to want it to, and all the rest of it. My 8-speed wasn't particularly smooth. It was very, very smooth when you were driving the Defender hard. And I think, I'll probably say this, the Defender's best with the P400, at least, when it's been driven very hard. and there's no doubt that the engine's got all the power through the entire rev range, and it's always there. You've always got barrels more power whenever you need it, and when you drive it spiritedly or hard, it's actually a fantastic vehicle. I think I remember telling you that I drove back in one hit from Vancouver once, 1,200 or so miles, and I did it in a time that wasn't legal, but that's another story. But the performance of the Defender in terms of being spirited and being driven hard was remarkable. It's a fantastic tool. But that gearbox, sort of, when you want to drive it steadily, or when you want to pick gears, or when you want to sort of do a progressive kind of driving, it's not there. It's all over the place, really. And it sort of lets the Defender down somehow, because it feels like the sort of tool that you should be able to do anything in. But when you drive it, it's sort of a bit, it feels a bit awkward somehow, like it's wanting to make its own mind up about things, and it's not always making its mind correctly. A bunch of Canadian geese here honking about. So this only having a 6-speed isn't really a detriment to me, and although that Defender is an outstanding drive, as I mentioned before, when you drive it spiritedly, and on the road, in terms of its road handling, it's also remarkable. But it's not actually any better than this. In fact, I don't think it's as good as this. This has a little bit more of a sort of a planted or sort of organic feel about it. It's not as technologically advanced as the Defender, obviously, and I'm sure, well, this has got 150,000 miles on it, so, or kilometres or whatever it is, so I'm sure that it's not as tight as the Defender was either, because that were brand new, weren't it, when I got it. But I don't think the Defender drives any better on the road than this does. The seats were comfortable, but not as comfortable as the Range Rover seats. The windshield and the sitting position is good in the Defender, but not quite as good as it is in this. The road holding in the Defender is excellent, probably on par with this. The comfort level from the bags, this is more comfortable, I would say. The Defender was a little bit more positive, and the new air spring kind of system, you could tell that it was far more advanced, but it was obviously a little bit harder. It was designed to carry more weight, isn't it? And so I don't think that was any better. The Defender was certainly better on the road than was the Discovery, which did sort of lean and roll a bit, to be honest. And having put some thought into it, I would say that I probably got rid of the Discovery because the seats weren't very comfortable, I think. And when I got out of... I once drove 18 hours in one hit to Tahoe with no stops, well, other than to fuel up. And when I got out of this, well, not this Range Rover, but my 2011, when I got out of it at Tahoe, I genuinely felt like I just got in it. My bum wasn't sore, my back wasn't sore, my neck wasn't sore, my elbows weren't sore, my shoulder wasn't sore. Not like I felt as fresh as when I got in it, and I'm not making that up. Now I should add that I am used to long driving, so sitting in the driving position, I used to drive trucks, so sitting in a driving position for that length of time wasn't really much of an issue for me. But so when I did a long trip in the Discovery, I found, certainly when I went to pick my mum up from Vancouver, take my mum back, I found that I'd sort of got done with it after about 4 hours. I wanted to get out, my bum was sore, and I needed to get out. I didn't get that in the Defender, but I did get that in the Discovery. And so I think probably one of the things that underlined whether or not I should go back to a Range Rover was the fact that while the tech was very, very good on the Discovery, in much the same way as the tech's advanced on the Defender, it frankly just wasn't as comfortable, and it didn't hold the road as well. Now that can't be said of the Defender compared to the Range Rover. It's probably as good, if not a touch better at holding the road than this Range Rover. And the seats were almost as comfortable, but it didn't have an armrest because they hadn't designed that flip-top cubby box. Well, this side if you're English. Didn't design the cubby box so that they could have an armrest, so it desperately missed that. It didn't have flappy paddles. This didn't have flappy paddles when I bought it, but it does now, and it was a 20-minute fit once I'd figured out how to make the gearbox work. And that turns this into a fantastic tool, as I'm sure it would the Defender, really. I mean, in terms of driving the Defender through the mountains, those paddles would have made it a far better tool, as I've mentioned in previous videos. The mirror was correctly placed and the visors were nicely placed. In terms of long-term driving, I'm not going to criticise the Defender in that way. The only thing I will say about this is that once you put the cruise control on at whatever speed you want to put it on, 80 kilometres, 100 kilometres, whatever speed you want, it stays there. The Defender had this annoying surging thing that it did, and I can't just tell you why that were. Land Rover said that it didn't do it, but everybody that I drove in the car said it did, and so did I created a couple of maps through the gap tool, and you could see the power applications where the power came on too hard. It wasn't a gentle sort of power application in order to match speed. You know, it wasn't that. It was this sort of flat out affair, and that ended up with this surge to speed of only a couple of kilometres, and then you'd slow down again to your speed, and then you'd sort of surge again, and it was so annoying that it really made the whole experience poor. Now, I should say in the Defender's defence that I drove a long way up to the Arctic Circle, and I never noticed that, all the way up and all the way back. And I only started to notice it, I actually mentioned this on one of the Facebook groups as well, I actually only started to notice half of the difficulties with the Defender once it had got sort of past 6 months old, and it had got about 20,000 miles on it. It was almost like it bedded in, but bedded in poorly somehow, like it just didn't bed in well. You know, it started to develop follows. Anyway, this surging was very annoying, and it did this thing when you went up hills that felt almost like the torque converter was on its way out, and you got a like slip somehow. And it happens when you get torque converters on the way out, that they sort of slip. It's a bit like a slipping clutch, really. But when you were climbing a hill of a certain angle, and I don't mean an off-road hill, I mean like on a highway sort of an hill, at a certain inclination and a certain throttle, you get this feeling that it had slipped, and it had actually, you could feel it in the car. So in terms of its actual road hauling, the Defender was outstanding, but in terms of smoothness of driving or something like that, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best, and it's not as good as this. The space. Now here's another thing. I'm going to stand up here, because one of the benefits of this Range Rover is that when you open it up, it's like up. It's open. You can fit wide things in and all that kind of stuff. I've got a fold-out table for me chop saw. And I can fit this in sideways, that in sideways, and I can put a toolbox in or some other stuff, some like chisels or screwdrivers or whatever. I can fit that in the side. And I am limited in terms of height in here, obviously, because it's a lower back than the Defender, but I actually couldn't fit that table in the back of the Defender, which was a bit odd in some respects, because it seemed a bit like I should be able to somehow, like I should. but it wouldn't slide in long ways because it wasn't long enough without dropping a seat, and it obviously wouldn't slide in sideways. And I ended up, I think, putting in vertically, which was all right, but then that narrowed down space at the side of it for longer things like the chop saw. So, and I did say in one of my videos, the working Defender, that you've got to get used to stacking things vertically rather than horizontally. But in hindsight, it wasn't always quite as easy as it should be to slide stuff in. And I found that I can actually put more things in the back of this than I could in the Defender, just because of the way it's laid out. And I actually went on a job just recently. In fact, you might have seen it. We're on Discovery, and I fired a bunch of stuff in back at Discovery, but the Discovery's quite low at the back, and I actually went back to job to finish it up the other week. Now snow's gone, and I threw all stuff in back at Range Rover, and I had more space in the back of the Range Rover, even though there's more space in the Discovery, just because of the way you load it. What else can I tell you about it? Well, the tech were really nice on Defender. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm a bit of a tech groupie, and so when they come out with new shiny doodads, I'm just waiting for him to start eating poop. When they start making shiny doodads, you know, like adaptive cruise control and emergency braking and all that kind of stuff, I like them. I never use them, but I like them. And so I do miss that. I suppose that's perhaps that and the roof rack are some things that I miss, because the tech on this, of course, it's I mean, this is a 2010. It's 12 years old now. But it's still got half of the stuff. It's still got the main beam assist, and it works on this. It doesn't ever stop working. And Defenders, you stop every couple of weeks, it'd have a moment when it would decide not to come on, or it wouldn't work. Or I had it fixed up at Jaguar Land Rover Calgary. They actually did an update to headlamp module, and it did fix it for a bit. And I drove over to BC, and I hit a swarm of little flies or something, and they got onto the screen anyway. That stopped one of the sensors working, and I had to pull over in the middle of mountains to get it to work, and I had cleaned windshield about 3 or 4 times because it just didn't settle in, because perhaps it were dark and it couldn't see. I don't know what it were, but I cleaned it properly 3 or 4 times in different laybys as I were trying to get it work, and it didn't work. And it's this kind of messing about that really spoiled my experience of the Defender, and it's one of the reasons I say it's just not better. The main beam assist just works on this. Every time you go around the corner, it dips the lights with cars coming on, and every time it's dark again, it just works. I really like the headlamps that move. I know this is a silly thing, but these adaptive moving headlights, or whatever they want to call them, on these Range Rovers in the mountains, they're actually really helpful, because as you start to turn for the corner, it's already starting to light up where you're going, not the wall in front of you, and some of the corners here are quite sharp, so that's actually a massive boon. And this Defender didn't have it. It had little corner lights which are designed to light up the curb when you go around a housing estate. Well, it's not the same thing, and it didn't work the same. So, and the headlights on the Defender were they were a disaster. I had better lights on my old Series 3. Like, I've never had a car that's had as well. That's not fair. They were better than that, but not much better than that. They were terrible, awful, and you can't do out with them because they're that fancy LED thing. Well, these lights weren't great in the HID things, but I paid $20 on AliExpress, and I've got a fancy LED Super Jimmy thing, and now I can see Brighton from Glasgow. You know, it's a lot better. The interior lights, you've seen my videos. I've changed all of these lights here. I've changed them to them LED units of Simon's at Powerful UK. It cost me $100, and I mean, I did buy that outstanding light from Tim for the back of the Defender, but why should we have to do that? Why haven't Land Rover realised it's a working vehicle and you kind of need to see him back? This vehicle has lights here, looking top tailgate, to shine down into tailgate. So when you're working in tailgate, you don't obscure the light. Why is that not either in the Discovery with better lights, and why is it not in the Defender? I mean, Tim's location for that light is spot on. I mean, I mentioned that to him when he sort of designed it. Well, we're involved to a small extent in the suggestion, but why do we have to have that? It ain't better. It's not better out at factory. It becomes better when you start spending money at it. And sure, I spent money on headlights on this, and I suppose you could say the same thing, but you know, at the time that the lights were developed for this was top tier. You know, the Defender's not top tier lights. It's got worse lights than Velar, than Discovery. It's got worse lights than this. It's just not better. It's worse lights than this before I started fiddling about with it. So those sorts of things are a bit frustrating because they're not better. Off-road capability. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of little slides now. I'll move to these little videos. I took the Defender out not long after I got it to an hillside near mine. It was actually an old coal shale bank, and I climbed it up there. It's a 33-degree bank, and I climbed the Defender up there. I'll set it up now so you can see it driving up now as we are, and it climbed there quite easily. It scrabbled for traction here and there, but it was very, very good, and it is very, very good. Ignoring the difficulties that I had with the dynamic stability control, which are a serious issue but probably fixable. Ignoring those issues, and it didn't really need it at that small hill climb, but it climbed that bank quite easily. And when it broke over at the top, there wasn't much in the way of noise from underneath in terms of, you know, the breakover angle. And when it approached it at the bottom, it's quite a sharp angle, and it didn't catch there either. It didn't sort of ground out or dig in when it climbed. And when I brought this to it a couple of weeks ago, this did sort of pick up a little bit of gravel at the bottom, just where the valance just dug in ever so slightly, but I would probably say that the catch there might have been only 2 inches, if that at the most. And there was some small amount of breakover noise, a little bit of grating at the top, but I don't know that it was like it didn't struggle any more or less than the Defender. It didn't climb it. I'll show you 2 videos here now if I have recorded it. If I actually saved the recording of the Defender. The first time we tried taking the Defender up, I tried with less momentum. I just tried to sort of pick a reasonable speed at the bottom and climb up it, and it wouldn't, and neither would this. But that's a lot more to do with the traction on the tyres and than putting the power down. I mean, this had put the power down and the Defender had pulled the power down, but if you're just spitting coal dust about, you're not actually going anywhere, are you? And the point that I'm mentioning, and the reason I mention this, is because sure, the Defender is a better tool off-road, I would say, in terms of approach angles and departure angles. But when you apply them, there are very few times when that extra inch is of a benefit. Sure, I suppose if you're doing something aggressively enough that it matters, then it'll matter, won't it? Because that's when it does matter, but most of the time it doesn't matter. And if you look at this chart that I'm going to show you now, it's got the figures on for the Discovery, the D5 and the Defender, and it's clear from these figures that the actual breakover angles are better on the Discovery than they are on the Defender. And in fact, if you look at them on the Range Rover, they're actually not that much difference at all. I mean, ½ inch either way, yeah, sure, but like I said, those are only critical when it's absolutely critical. The wading depth is a little under on this. Sure, that's something the Defender's got into its favour. And it's absolutely clear that the newer technology and the terrain response and no, that's not what I'm saying. The technology, the speed at which the ABS and the slip is able to be monitored in the the Defender is probably 4 times as fast, maybe 8 times as fast as it is in the L320 and L322. And I do have a feeling that may be critical at some stages when slip is likely to obtain. And I do think that the Defender might be a bit more planted in terms of catching up with that slip and maybe slipping less. But my experience with my Defender was horrible because of that DSC, which cuts in when slips detected. So taking the power again, took it off me. Detecting more slip only meant more DSC engagement, and you couldn't switch it off. And this Range Rover here doesn't really seem to suffer from that issue, because you turn the DSC off and it's 95% off, and it just goes. And that's how that is really. Now, I'm going to say for certain that the beefiness of the Defender exceeds the beefiness of this, but where you notice it is only when you're being extreme, and I wasn't really being extreme with mine. I mean, if you go and navigate the Sahara or something, you go and try and barrel it up one of them big dunes, then I'm sure that, you know, over some boulders in Colorado, then I'm sure that it matters, but none of matter to me. This has 510 horsepower. It's a supercharged V8, AJ V8, 5 litre displacement, and running this from here to Calgary, I can get about 24 to 26 miles to the gallon in imperial measurements. If I were very, very kind to my Defender, I might get 16. When it were brand spanking new and I did that trip up to the Arctic Circle, over 5,500 miles, I got 17.6 miles to the gallon, imperial. And I was travelling at slower speeds, I suppose. I know that I did have a bit of stuff on roof rack, but I've driven this, an L322, 1,800 miles to Tahoe with 2 kayaks and 3 rooftop boxes and a big roof rack on my L322 there, and I still got 20 miles to the gallon with that, with all that lot on the roof, and I should have expected that to do much less. The reality is that P400 is a gas hog, and there's no need for it because it's brand new technology, it's less displacement, and it's more gears. It's got a slippier body, it's slightly taller but narrower, so it moves less air. Like, it just should be better, and it isn't. And I don't miss that. I don't miss driving to Edmonton or however far, 1,500 miles, and it being literally hundreds of dollars cheaper to do in this car. It's 5 or 6 or 7 miles to a gallon cheaper, and that over a long journey, 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles, that's a lot of coin. And I don't miss that in the Defender at all. I moved primarily to the Discovery for fuel reasons, and that TD6 did 36 miles to the gallon. Now, there was nowhere near as much horsepower and it didn't go quite as well, but you can see from a number of climbing videos that we've done when Emeka takes his 5 litre. I'll see if I can't just track that video. If not, I'll just flag it up here. But we did hill climb, Emeka in his L494 with the same engine as this in it, my TD6 in the Disco, and then Richard with his 5 litre supercharged in his Range Rover Sport, and it was clear from that video that my Discovery climbed up that hill much nicer than either the other two. I would like to take this up to see how this did by comparison, but that engine, the TD6, was very, very nice for doing that progressive kind of climbing stuff. Much nicer really than the P400, which was a bit of a bear at the best when it comes to doing anything progressive. So really, and in summary, I don't miss the Defender at all. I miss the fact that I'm part of a big community, and while the Range Rover, the L322, has a growing sort of fan base as things move on and people start to find them more cheaply and start to off-road them a bit, I suppose, and overland them a bit. So I do miss being part of that big Defender community, because the views to my videos have gone down from 7,000 and 10,000 to maybe 500. I do miss it, you know, it's content based, I think, so a lot of folk do prefer the Defender content, and I sort of knew that going in. In terms of what you miss and what you gain, you know, it wasn't as nice to drive as this, it wasn't as comfortable as this, it wasn't as quiet as this, it wasn't as smooth as this, it wasn't as cheap as this to run, it wasn't as fuel economical, it wasn't that much better off-road. When it came to loading the back, it was a bit problematic. When it came to sensor issues, they were manifold. It was a new thing every day. The little snippet, and that beep you heard there was the emergency steering active. I've no idea why, because there's no on the road. But anyway, I imagine that once every couple of days I'd have to stop and clean a sensor or wipe a bug off the front of the Land Rover Badger, or try and reset the adaptive headlight thing or whatever it was, the main beam assist, like almost every day, and so that's not better, because you know what, I fire this up and it doesn't do anything. Like, it just runs. I don't have any faults on it, I don't think, really. It doesn't stop working, the headlights just come on like everything goes, you know, and that wasn't the case with the Defender. So no, I don't miss it, is the answer to the question. And if I did miss it, really, and I suppose if you boiled it down to actual real needs and things that were substantive issues, it's got to just be that roof rack and that ladder. And now I'm putting the roof rack, the Discovery roof rack on this. I mean, I don't have a ladder, but now I'm putting the roof rack on this. I might actually, you know, I'll have a word with my mate Andrew Nix. He runs Voyager racks, and I didn't want his rack because it was tubular, and much of the stuff that I've got doesn't really fit with the tubular stuff, and it does have rails on the side of his which sort of interfere with me loading timbers and stuff like that. But he does have a rack, like a ladder, that fits on the back of the tailgate here. It sort of goes up the back, and you can kind of stand on here and then stand on there, and then up your ladder you go. So I might just have a word with him, see if he won't flirt me one of them down, and just put some aluminium treads on it to make it look a bit like it sort of matches. But now I'm putting the roof rack on this car, it's even less in favour of the Defender, really, and not that much in favour of Discovery either. But anyway, so there you are. Basically, that's my story. It's a bit of a long rambling one, isn't it? But it is what it is, and I'll interject this video, as you've probably seen, with lots and lots of content. And I should just, the one caveat that I'm going to make is that the fact that I've shown you more Defender content in the videos is nothing to do with the fact that I actually miss the Defender more. It's just I've only had this a couple of months, and I've spent most of them at home, not really doing anything. So I've just got more content on Defender. I had that a year and did lots and lots of things with it, so I've just got more of it, really. So don't look back at the amount of Defender content I showed you and as if that sort of indicates that I do actually miss it more than I say I do. I just don't have enough content of this yet. But anyway, so that's that. I'll try and throw this together. Thank you very much for tuning in. I've got a couple of other little bits of videos kicking about that I'm going to throw on. I've got some new bulbs that I'm going to throw in the back here, and I'll show you them when we get on. And that's it. I hope you like this fancy bridge that I've brought you out here to see, and I'll show you some video content of that. I flew the drone down here, so should all be very super pretty and sunny and stuff. So that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Me and Jip will wish you a fond farewell. Be good to each other, and we'll catch you next time. Cheerio.